You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. I have so much to talk about in this show today. We're going to talk about the Sox, how they're doing. I mean, it's tough to go in, day out, and talk about this team and its performance. But there's some bright spots we'll get into, some observations, something that really struck me as telling about the organization and their system in the minor leagues compared to what's actually working out for them at the major league level. But before we get into any of that, Ed, first of many stories, and I know you have a great one as well. Because you were gifted tickets.
I was.
You were gifted tickets because you survived a heart attack, right? That's what it was? It was a group of people.
A bunch of our friends. Yeah, our mutual friends.
Yeah, who are all on the radio. So it's all radio people. It's all media
all
people.
Radio folk.
Big giant, like the tech strand. And I remember when you were in the hospital, everybody's like, we should buy him something. And I'm like, what do you mean we need to buy him? He's Landon, we're going to buy him something? Yeah, let's buy him Sox tickets, which first of all, I thought was a terrible idea because you have a heart problem. So why would I subject you to the White Sox on purpose as a gift for surviving a heart attack? Like, that seemed like a crazy idea. But secondly, I thought to myself, It's entirely
possible I'm not terribly popular with that group. Just nobody says it out loud.
Maybe they're trying to finish you off. But then the other thing was, I was like,
at long last, we're rid of the dude.
We're giving out gifts for living? Like, just for survival gifts.
Well, I couldn't have used the tickets if I died.
Yeah, I know, but why are we giving out gifts for being alive? Like, hey, congratulations, big guy. You lived. You get tickets to a ball game? I lived this week. Nobody gave me tickets. It just seems like I didn't go in on the purchase. I'm one of the cheap ones that didn't jump in. They were like, everybody Venmo money, and I just ignored it.
You just didn't. Well, I for one am appreciative to all that did it, and okay, whatever.
I talk to you every day though, so these are a bunch of people I think that regretted not speaking to you on a normal basis. Like, they're like, oh God, I haven't talked to him in months. Maybe I should send him something. Like, you see that regret when people pass or like they almost die, right? Like, you see it all the time. That's what I felt it was. And meanwhile,
that's a kind way of saying you've had enough of me as well. So,
well, meanwhile, I'm like, I just had beers with him last week, and I'm sure I'll see him in a week or so. Like, he's okay, guy. Like, I took it very differently. But tell this story. Before I get into what happened to me, I went over to Cork and Carry. I want to talk about them. They're back on board. Another great partner here on Sox in the Basement, Cork and Carry at the park at 33rd and Princeton. And I'm going to get into how that all went down. And an interesting observation when I went over there last Friday, talking with the folks over at Cork and Carry at the park. Get over there pregame, postgame, enjoy the ambiance. And again, I'm going to get into why you should be going there, even if you don't have tickets to the game. But tell me about what happened to those tickets, because in the end, you didn't go, and it was for this past Sunday against the Astros, right?
Yeah, it was the May the 4th game. So I think they were also taking advantage of my nerdiness and my affinity for Star Wars, so I could get Steve Stone as a Stormtrooper, whatever. Steve Stone, by the way, better aim in his prime than any Stormtrooper in the history of the franchise.
Yes.
So I understood what it was. It just so happened to coincide with my daughter's first communion. So I could not be at a White Sox game. I had to be in church.
These are people that don't talk to you enough, and they're buying you a gift because they feel guilty. I would have never bought you something for your daughter's first communion, which I just learned was this past Sunday. Congratulations to her. Continue.
Thank you. So I offered them back to the group. I say, anybody wants to take advantage of these tickets, just let me know. So a friend of ours, she said, I'll take them. There were 4 tickets. She's got 2 kids. So I'm sitting in church and my phone's going off. And of course, now they have decided that my daughter, because she is the outlier in the family as far as things like being attentive and not causing problems in public, they've decided that she is one of the good ones. And so they put her up front, feeling like she must be representative of the Siebert family.
Yeah, but the problem is her father's phone is going off in church. So the mistake is you're sitting up front as well, right?
Between me, the 13-year-old who is reading A Christmas Carol, because it's the only thing that would fit in his jacket pocket, because I wouldn't let him have his phone and his headphones, and then my wife, who's looking around and just assessing the situation and trying to keep us all in line.
Right.
There was a potential for problems, but I kind of got a glance, but I couldn't answer. and I saw that it was our friend Dana who had taken the tickets. And she was telling me that she couldn't get in with the tickets that I had transferred to her.
And she's a big star. She's on the mix. She's a big star. She should have been able to just big time herself in.
She should have just said, "Do you know who I am?" and gotten in.
Yeah, she's been on the mix for years. She should have been able to pull.
But she's humble. She's very kind and humble, so she didn't want to cause trouble. But really, the thing that was vexing was they told her that all I had transferred to her were the tickets for the bobblehead. Not for the game.
Hold on a
just
second.
Bobblehead tickets.
So the tickets they bought you were this gesture. This grand gesture.
No, there were seats tied. There were seats tied to it. It was in the bullpen bar area.
Okay.
They were game tickets, but they said that she only received from me in the transfer of tickets from through Ticketmaster. She only received bobblehead tickets, which I didn't think were a thing.
So hold on a second. So you can actually buy bobblehead tickets separate from game like, is that like a thing now? Because for you to have to
walk
have two
up,
separate
stand
tickets,
in line, go through security, get your bobblehead, and then they kick you out.
That's really weird. Think about that.
Bizarre.
I mean, that's like saying we know our promotions are better than our team, if that's a real thing. I've never heard of such a thing, but what you're saying is the only ticket she had was just bobblehead only tickets. And
that's what they were telling her and a handful of other people, apparently, because eventually she said she just wore them down and they're like, okay, fine, just go in the park, because there was like her and maybe her family and maybe 10 other people that were waiting to get in. That was it.
Hold on a second. How do you, as anybody working for the White Sox, argue with anybody who wants to come in and see your product right now? Like your
who
stadium
has tickets, by the way,
and they're going to walk in and buy food. Like if you gave away tickets for
she has
free,
2 little kids. Of course, she's going to be buying food. There's no way those two aren't going to get fed.
If you gave away tickets for free on game day and let the stadium fill up, you'd make more money than keeping it empty. That's how bad it is over there right now. Plus, you can just buy a ticket at the window for $7, and you could sit anywhere you want to right now. It's like the mid 80s. Like it's crazy to me that was even a dispute at the gate. That's insane to me. And it leads me back to what I want to talk about with Cork and Carry at the Park. Friday, I go over there, and a lot of people were wondering why they hadn't heard anything or seen the logo or anything like that for Cork and Carry at the Park, which has been the home of Sox in the Basement for years. And a lot of it stems from how the team is doing. It's not because they didn't want to work with us, okay? I mean, they love us, we love them. But it's how the team is doing. Like, I can sit around and tell you till I'm blue in the face, when you're down at the game, go to Cork and Carry at the Park. But if nobody's at the game, it kind of defeats the purpose, right? But something...
Yeah, I mean, basically what we're telling you is go to Cork and Carry at the Park regardless.
Go over to 33rd and Princeton and just go over there. Here's the interesting thing.
Go there and watch the Brewers.
That's what's happening, though. Like, I'm sitting there and I'm having a conversation. I go, well, this is really full in here. It was like Friday night. I'm like, this is pretty full in here. And you guys are doing pretty well. It'll all empty out, though, when the game starts. And the answer was, not really. And I was like, really? And they're like, no. There's now a set of fans that want to be around the ballpark, want to hang around White Sox fans, but would rather sit in the bar and watch the game on TV. Like last year and every previous year, that place becomes a ghost town right before the game starts, right?
Right.
Like people are chugging the last beer down and they're trying to run over there for the start of the game. There's always a couple of stragglers that probably don't get in there until the end of the first inning. But like that place could be wall-to-wall people. And then you would have 4 bartenders standing there and one guy at the end of the bar who just didn't have a ticket. Like that's what it's like every year. And it sounds like now there's a subset of fans that linger around the ballpark and hang out at establishments like Cork and Carry at the Park who are like, yeah, I'm not going in there.
Yeah, I'm not doing this.
Like I want, and that goes back to then if somebody shows up at the door and they think they have a ticket and they already have a bobblehead ticket, let them in the door, for crying out loud. Nobody wants to come in and see your team.
Also, why are you selling separate tickets for the promotion?
That's really weird. It's really, really weird. Sox in the Basement listeners, switch to a new age of life with Hyatt Home Medical Equipment. Keep mom and dad, grandma and grandpa out of assisted living and make it so they can get around on their own and live independently. Stair lifts, ramps, grab bars, lift chairs, and even bathroom remodeling. Hyatt's going to work with your insurance. They have 0% financing for qualified individuals. If you have a CPAP machine, you don't like your vendor, you want the newest, the latest, the greatest, they have testing rooms there, but if you switch now, they'll mail your supplies directly to you. They also have the latest and greatest in continuous glucose monitors and so much more. See what Hyatt Home Medical Equipment can do for you at hhme.com. Now, on Sunday, that bobblehead, if I'm not mistaken, was the Dick Allen bobblehead, correct?
No, that was the day before. It was the Dick
that was
Allen,
on Saturday?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, Sunday was Steve Stone as a stormtrooper.
Okay, so Saturday was Dick Allen. All right, because I got the bobblehead gifted to me.
Well, see, there you go. You got something for staying alive this week. Congratulations.
I got that for staying alive. A shout out to Colleen Klimzak. She runs the podcast Your Organized Life on the Broadcast Basement Network. She records here at the studio every week. She's a professional organizer. She got a bunch of bobbleheads. And what does a professional organizer do when they have more than one thing of the same thing? They get rid of it because they don't
declutter.
They declutter immediately. And she was like, I'm going to give one to Chris. So I have it right here in the box if you're watching on the YouTube channel, but you can follow along if you're listening to the audio podcast. But on the video, you'll see it, and I'm opening it up right now. I wanted to bust it out while you were talking because I have
He's got the top off here, folks.
An amazing story from Colleen about this bobblehead. Remember when this was announced, Ed? What was our number one criticism about the bobblehead sponsored by Binny's, the Dick Allen bobblehead that was going to come out in May?
The bobblehead was not smoking a heater the way Dick Allen was in the dugout.
That's exactly what it was. Like, and I'll hold it up to the camera for those on the YouTube channel here if they haven't seen it. I mean, you could see him and he's juggling. There's 3 balls. There's little springs here that so the balls will move along and the head bobbles, and it's a bobblehead. It's a Dick Allen bobblehead. It's really nice, but it's missing the cigarette. It's missing the heater. We complained about this. And I know we're not the only people that complained about this.
Oh, no, it was a pretty common complaint because, I mean, let's face it, juggling in the dugout is one thing, but juggling in the dugout while you're smoking.
That's what made it cool, even though kids don't smoke and I was never a smoker. But I mean, still,
I was never a smoker either,
iconic.
but that's the iconic thing. Right. I mean, it's Dick Allen with the full 70s swag. I mean, that was the era, right? I mean, that's what 70s cool was right then and there. And it's just missing something when it doesn't have it there.
Okay, so this is what Colleen tells me. She tells me she gets the bobbleheads. Her and her husband are in there. They've got their 2 bobbleheads. They're going to watch the game. They bought $7 tickets. They walked up and said, what's your cheapest ticket? And then they just sat wherever they wanted to, right? So they're down on the 100 level, even though they bought the tickets up in the upper corner. All right, that's how you do it. That's how you go to a White Sox game until they change. So, I don't even buy online. I show up to the ticket window so I don't have to pay any fees. Get cheap, folks. It's okay.
Yeah, forget Ticketmaster. Go to Cork and Carry at the park and then go get a $7 ticket if you want to walk in the third inning.
As long as Andrew Vaughn is hitting in the center of the order, don't feel bad.
No.
Find a way in any way you want to. Heck, I'll encourage you to find a way to sneak in. Like, just go back to what it was like when you were a kid at the old ballpark and you're trying to find like that loose gate behind the old scoreboard so you can slide up there on those ramps that were back there, right? Where all the kids were running around wild. Anyway, she's in there and she runs into, as she tells me, 2 really drunk gentlemen. Like, that's how she says it. She's like, these guys were bombed and the game hasn't even started yet. And they're talking to her and her husband and they're like, you guys get the cigarette? And they're like, no, there's no cigarette. There's a cigarette. And they tell her to go to some section. It was either 140 or 114. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there was a section behind one of the sections on the lower level. And she says she goes there. And there's one single woman who's sitting at a table with nothing but a black tablecloth. There's no signage. There's no indication as to what she's doing there. And almost like some sort of secret spy movie, if you walked up to her and said, do you have the Dick Allen cigarettes? She would pull out these little baggies. I'll hold it up for the video people. And it's got a tiny little cigarette inside of it. And
excellent.
They hand it out. So it wasn't included in the box. But if you went to the super secret table that was word of mouth, at least according to Colleen, you got the heater for Dick Allen. Now, this is so last minute planned that it is my belief that this is in response to the outcry over the lack of a cigarette. Because normally when you get a bobblehead and it's got an attachment, whether the bat is sticking out, there's something fun. Like I have one, it's an AJ Pierzynski one, and there's a mask that hangs over his shoulder. You had to lay that over him after you put the bobblehead together. So normally there would be like a little hole there somewhere around his lips, and you would screw the cigarette in, and that would be something you would attach because it's little and it's breakable. None of that exists here. The girl at the table tells Colleen and her husband, you got to super glue it on his face.
Good God.
I guarantee this was a last minute fix. I guarantee
100%.
This was
100%.
Everybody's mad at us. Yeah, everybody's mad at us. Everybody thinks we're even dropping the ball on bobbleheads. The team is terrible. We need to do whatever we can, get a bunch of cigarettes made, and tell people to glue it on Dick Allen's face. But we can't hang it. We can't hand it out when the kids are walking in, and we can't advertise it. So now we've got to start a word of mouth campaign somehow to get people to go to the special table. Think about how nuts that is.
I will give the White Sox the benefit of the doubt that the idea behind that being that they just don't want to deal with the fallout of advertising smoking in this day and age, because again, we are talking about an image from over 50 years ago, and it's just a different world. And you and I can appreciate that, but obviously there are some parents and some folks with kids these days who may not have had that time period in their lives or that aesthetic as part of their lives growing up, and we cater to them now, don't we?
Yeah, he's got a little filter, and then there's the rest of the cigarette, and then there's a lot of ash at the end, and that's
yeah, well, I mean, it was a well pulled on lung dart that he had in his mouth in the picture, so it makes sense.
Yeah, and that's what it is. But I just find it to be funny. I find it to be funny that I first don't believe it was part of the original bobblehead design. And secondly, it was at a super secret table in which people found out about it word of mouth because they couldn't hand it out at the door. I just find, and what it tells me is...
Gives new meaning to the phrase secret square.
It tells me the same thing that you can buy, supposedly, we don't know if this is true, you can buy just a bobblehead ticket now to avoid the game. It tells me, me there's at least some awareness in the building of what this team is. And how, and that's sad because the owner's a billionaire and it should be better. Right? And
it should be.
It really should be. We talked about it in the off season. We don't ever accept this as, well, it's just a rebuild. Remember, they could have spent $30-40 million and still stayed right at the bottom of Major League Baseball's payroll. They could have come in at $90 million and reduced themselves by $40 or $50 million. They could have saved money and they could have added a couple of bats and a pitcher, and at least it would be like a 500 team and there'd be something to watch at the ballpark. And you could have still rebuilt, and you could have just put better players in place until guys were available and ready to play. Instead, what you did is you completely bottomed out and cheaped out and then tried to convince everybody that Colson Montgomery, who had not performed at all in AAA with the exception of like a week at the end there and some Arizona Fall League, who you could see, and we talked about this on the last show, really good prospect in single A, becomes a 240 hitter in double A with his OPS starting to bottom out, and then gets to AAA and he's terrible. And you're like, no, we don't need to spend money. We're in the full rebuild. We don't want to have anybody in his way. We don't want to go get somebody that will block him. Block him? Jacob Amaya is blocking him right now because he's better than Colson Montgomery.
They released Bobby Dahlbeck, who was playing shortstop, because he's better than Colson Montgomery.
Right. And that's the thing. So, I mean, never forget that. I'm not going to start doing my yelling. I think I lost my cigarette. Where'd it go? I got to find it. Oh, there it is. It's at Dick Allen's feet.
Yeah,
it's at Dick Allen's feet.
Don't.
I got to super glue that on before I lose it.
Yeah, you got to get that. You got to get that glued on, my friend.
Got to get a little Gorilla Glue, little crazy glue, something.
Some sticky.
I got to super glue that thing on. Okay, but yeah, this team, at least they're figuring out in the marketing department. They know what they are. Okay, we got to get the super secret table, and maybe we'll sell just bobblehead tickets. I mean, it's crazy to me. You could have spent a little bit more money, had a few better players, been halfway respectable, and still developed your players down in the minor leagues. And let's talk about that development real quick. I don't know if you've noticed it, but I've noticed it. The White Sox have a couple of Rule 5 players on their team. You got two pitchers that are Rule 5 guys on your team right now. They are, what do we got here? We got Shane Smith and Mike Vassell, correct? That's what we've got?
Yeah, you got your best starter and arguably your best reliever.
That's the point I want to make.
Rule 5.
That's the point I want to make. Mike Vassell's a Rule 5 guy. He's had 10 appearances. He's got a 0.92 earned run average over 19 2/3 innings. He has a 1.07 walks and hits per innings pitched, the beautiful whip that I love so much, and opponents are hitting 136 against him coming out of the pen. The other Rule 5 guy is Shane Smith, who won the 5th starter role, but is literally the ace through the first month and a half or so of this season. In 7 games, he has a 241 earned run average over 37 1/3 innings. He's got a 1.15 whip. He's the only White Sox starter with one lower than 1.30, which I always say is a line for me. You're below it, you're an effective, good, top of the rotation. Not even top of the rotation. At least you're in the 3 spot, maybe. Okay, of a rotation. And he's got opponents hitting 207 against him. Now think about that. You have 2 Rule 5 guys there. You're hiding another one that you just threw on the IL because you don't know where to put him, but you don't want to give him back. And you're acquiring these guys. These are guys that were good enough to select in the Rule 5 draft, but not good enough for their former team to protect them because they had to protect players that they thought were more valuable on their 40-man roster. And they are your best performers right now. All of what you developed is somehow not as good, at least this early in the season, in terms of actual performance and numbers. I don't want to hear about pedigree. I don't want to hear about ceilings. I don't want to hear about what could be. I heard about that with Colson Montgomery forever, and I don't even believe he should be rated as a prospect on the MLB Top 100 list, and I'm sure they're going to take him off of there, and you shouldn't even consider him as a prospect until somebody proves otherwise. He has to prove it otherwise over a long period of time before you start to believe it. So I don't want to hear about any of that. Let's talk results. These guys are actually in the major leagues and performing. And what does that say, Ed? That another team, other teams, guys that were developed with them, but they didn't have room for them. So not even their best guys, just guys that they developed in their own system are somehow more valuable than really anything you developed, at least to this point in the season, coming out of your bullpen or going and taking the mound to start a game.
Well, but even look at what you quote unquote developed, right? I mean, look at the guys that are in and around. Davis Martin's been around a long time in the system. Jonathan Cannon was a guy that you brought in from outside. Jordan Leisure you brought in from outside. Bryce Wilson you brought in from outside. Sean Burke is really the only other homegrown guy, and he's been okay. He was your opening day starter, but that was probably a miscast. And you're right, though. It's somewhat telling that when you look up and down what they have, and the pitching, we talked about it going into the season, how the pitching, because of the Bannister effect, was more advanced than the hitting, that you could argue that the pitching was going to have to carry them if they were going to do anything. And it's sort of been a letdown because you've had to take Davis Martin, Sean Burke, and Jonathan Cannon and make them bulk relievers and have an opener to try and get them to be more effective, which is, I appreciate the fact that Will Venable tried that.
He's trying. I like the fact that he's doing something. The last guy didn't do anything. So at least this guy's trying. You have to appreciate he's been given a bunch of crap and he's still trying as hard as he can to win games. And I'm sure his players really appreciate it, although they're probably still questioning why Andrew Vaughn plays so much. These young guys have to be questioning that. But that's not him.
Yeah.
I guarantee that's not him. That's Getz and the guys above him forcing that. I believe that in my heart.
Oh, yeah. And that's where, one of the fallacies about a whole rebuild comes into play anyway, because we've always talked with the White Sox about a rebuild being a tear it down to the studs and then play young guys and not mix and match in veterans or something like that, and then spend the money when the guys develop and are showing results at the major league level. That's when you turn around and you get the high-priced free agents and everything. That's not really how it works, though. What's supposed to happen is you're supposed to identify some veteran players that you think are going to be around and good long enough that you can let guys develop around them. And you build around veteran guys and guys that are already producing results. The White Sox have done it ass backwards, where they've gone in and they've said, we're gonna pump the young guys up. We're gonna rely on a Colson Montgomery instead of a major league shortstop, and we're gonna let him develop around Josh Rojas at third or second base. We're gonna let him develop around Andrew Vaughn at first base. We're gonna let him develop in terms of in the lineup around Luis Robert Jr. and Andrew Benintendi. We're not doing that because those veterans are guys that we intend to build around. We're doing that because those are guys that we're just filling in, and we're not committed to them. We're just stuck with them. Okay. They didn't identify guys that they wanted to keep around. Josh Rojas is only here on a 1-year deal. Andrew Vaughn, I don't know why he's here. Andrew Benintendi, his contract and Luis Robert Jr.'s contract are relics from the last core, quote unquote, right? And Benintendi was brought in at the end of the last rebuild, quote unquote, to try and be a veteran, that comes in and builds around.
It was desperation by a front office that knew they were on their last leg.
Right, yeah. Exactly. So what we're seeing here, and what you're seeing by Shane Smith and Mike Vassell coming in, and to an extent, Gage Workman is the other Rule 5 guy, and he's buried on the bench because it may turn out that he's not good at baseball.
Well, they gave him 1 day and then they put him on the IL to make room for Mydroth. So he's like, that's what they're doing. They're hiding him right now because this is how they're acquiring talent, which is fascinating to me. They have 3 Rule 5 guys right now.
Right. And you don't know about Gage Workman. I say he's not very, because he was terrible, arguably, on the Cubs. But you have these guys that are coming in from the outside because you have not either had the time to develop the young guys or because you have developed them improperly, where they are not learning from a veteran presence. The rotation this year was all young guys. The old man in the rotation was Martin Perez, who has made all of 4 starts and has spent more time injured than not. And to a certain degree, Davis Martin, who, again, he's been around the White Sox system a long time, but he's not really, I don't know how much of a veteran pitcher you really qualify him as.
And you know what it really comes down to? It comes down to whether or not you think that it's Chris Getz's fault because he was in charge of all that, or was Chris Getz not allowed to do what he's doing now with all these changes that are happening behind the scenes, and because the group ahead of him wasn't giving him the tools. And we're never going to know that. We're never going to know that unless all of a sudden you see a change in what they're developing down in the minor leagues. If all of a sudden we start to see things that make us believe that they can draft a guy, he doesn't need to be the highest pedigree, he can make it to the majors and he can actually perform. And that's what the weirdest thing is about Tim Elko, currently hitting .333 with a .408 on base percentage and a .1065 OPS, still sitting in the minors, because here's a guy that you could say, we got to him, he's figured it out, look at him perform, it's time to replace the guy that's standing over at first base.
And yet, they don't.
They don't.
And that's the frustrating thing, too, is there's been plenty of roster churn here. You know, I mentioned Bobby Dahlbeck got DFA'd. And Bobby, we hardly knew you. You know, you came up and he played shortstop, which was out of position for him. He wasn't exactly. He was
a weird
dead at the plate.
Everything with him was weird because he didn't perform well enough in spring training for you to even feel like they should hold on to him.
Right. Then he did well in AAA.
Right. He goes on to AAA. He plays well, not as well as Tim Elko, not as well as Mydroth. He wasn't performing as well as Caro, and they were like, well, let's bring him up, and then he wasn't really. I don't know. I think we all knew what he was. I think they knew what he was. It was a strange call up. It was a strange time that you had him here. And again, I don't know why you waste your time on guys like him when you have a guy like Elko who's got 10 home runs in AAA. He's got 10 home runs. I know it's a bandbox, but I mean, like,
you have a power problem though in Chicago because Luis Robert Jr. is your team leader with 3.
I know, and he's starting to come alive.
Well, that's over the last 15 days.
Starting to come alive. I've elevated him on my fantasy baseball dynasty team. He was in the minor leagues. I actually demoted Luis Robert Jr. at the start of the year. How bad he was doing. Demoted him.
How could you not?
It's the only thing I can do as a fan and a fantasy baseball owner is to demote Luis Robert Jr. And he was elevated to the lineup starting on Monday on my team. So I'm sure he's going to go into an absolute dive now. But he's been on fire. He's been really good lately. I mean, in fact, here, let me bring up what he's been doing over the last, we'll just look at his last 7 games, okay? We'll take a look at his last 7 games. I want to say him and Miguel Vargas, who I'm telling you, the moment I start to believe in this guy is going to let me down. He's going to let me down. Right now,
it's all smoke and mirrors with Miguel Vargas as far as you're concerned.
Robert Jr. is hitting .318 with a 900 OPS over the last 7 days. Vargas .350 with a 958 OPS over the last 7 days. If I look at his last 15 days, Miguel Vargas hitting .381 with a 1017 OPS. But when I click on that last 30 days, which is a bigger sample size, it's pretty pedestrian. At least it's well over his career average. He's hitting .244. He's still under 700 with his OPS. He's hot right now. I mean, do you really buy it? Do you really buy that somehow they changed something in his swing and the Dodgers couldn't figure it out, but we did? Like, I want to believe it. Think of the hope that gives you. Do you buy it?
The only thing that I see over the last 15 days when we adjust the stats to look at 7 days, 15 days, the smaller sample size, is that he is walking more or equal to the number of strikeouts, which means that he is showing some more selectivity. At least that's what that tells me.
It's such a good sign. It's such a big sign. And that is
something that's a change in mentality that sometimes comes with coaching, and maybe the Dodgers just couldn't get it through to him, or maybe the Dodgers wanted him to do something different, and he's finally comfortable doing something else. The one thing I've noticed about the team in general, since Edgar Caro's been up and Chase Mydroth has come back off the IL, is that in situations where they have the opportunity to score runs, there are guys that they're settling for solid contact and just putting the ball in play and trying to get that base hit, right? They're not going for all of it all at once, and nobody feels like they have to go for all of it all at once. That's
very different. That's very different than the White Sox of the last decade.
Yeah, and so when I see that Miguel Vargas is being more selective, getting on base, not necessarily going for power, not necessarily, and he's got a couple of home runs, but when I see that, that's the only thing that encourages me, is that maybe he is being more selective and he's seeing the ball really well, but that could also just be being hot, right? The one thing that I really like about Luis Robert Jr.'s game is the fact that he's leading the majors in stolen bases right now, because we've always talked about his ability to hit for average, his ability to hit home runs and the need for him to do that, but it's not an underrated or lost on me part of his game that, for example, the other night when he knocks in a run, he steals a base and then can score on a base hit because he's stolen his 15th base of the year. That's a huge thing. That gave Edgar Caro an RBI opportunity, and Luis Robert Jr. giving Edgar Caro RBI opportunities is a lot different than Luis Robert Jr. looking behind him in the lineup and going, Vaughn, who's back there with him? Anyone? Oh, Miguel's not hitting well, and oh goodness, we have Michael Taylor's hitting 6 for some reason, even though, I don't know, why is Jacob Amaya even here?
It makes a difference. It goes back to a point made earlier on in this show. You could have spent just a little bit more money and added a little bit more of a supporting cast, and that may have helped some of your other guys like Luis Robert Jr., who you need to perform so you can trade him, and some of these guys that are developing. This idea that you're blocking somebody and it's this justification to just be cheap, and you're seeing the results of it right now, because you can't tell me the manager's bad. I see him doing anything and everything he can to help these guys out. And you can't tell me that you didn't have a few guys that were available in the minor leagues that were going to develop this year. Sure, Montgomery didn't work out, but look at what Meidroth is doing. Look at what Caro is doing. Look at what Elko is doing when you finally figure it out. There's a lot there. It could have been a little bit better. I'm not saying you go to the playoffs. You don't need to be the worst team in baseball, and it might have been better for development if you would have used your wallet just a little bit better. If you would have been a little bit more selective in who you were adding onto this team. It's still a massive problem for a team that has to go hand out secret cigarettes to make people happy with the bobbleheads. Supposedly there's bobblehead tickets now. I don't know if that's true or not. And Nancy Faust is back. And they could have brought her back any time, Ed. It's not that she just became available, it's that they just finally figured out they need her. Congrats, Nancy.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.